This is Angelica from APCA Philippines, and we're doing some products demo, and we're using Peotraco items as you can see here. So for now, we're going to make the raspberry syrup. So here is your raspberry puree. Put it in first, the liquid. And then next is your sugar to avoid the burning. Also, when making syrup or anything with puree, do not boil the puree because it will lose its color. And then for this one, just let it melt and then let all the sugar dissolve. So next, we're going to make the raspberry jelly. So first, also put in your raspberry puree. Then next is your sugar. Then let it simmer off heat, then add your jelly. You see there's tiny bubbles already, then you can stop the heat, turn off, and then add your bloom gelatin. And then just stir until it melts. So if you notice, I use a spatula because I don't want to incorporate so much air into the puree when I use the whisk. So just lightly stir until melted. So your raspberry jelly is your insert for your Petit Gateau. So after all the gelatin is melted, you can transfer this one to a container. So you can easily pour into the mold. And then it's important to scrape clean so you don't waste anything. For the mold here, I will just pour around 3/4. A little more than half will do, since our Petit Gateau is just very small. So next, we're doing chocolate sponge. So first, sift all your dry ingredients into the parchment paper. So cocoa powder, APF, icing sugar, and then almond powder. And then next, melt your butter. And then here on the side, make sure you have a pot of boiling water because we'll be needing it for the bain-marie of your sabayon. So first, put in your eggs. And then next, put your sugar. So for this one, bain-marie until 35 degrees. Just to loosen up your eggs so it will be easier for you to whip up later. So you need to whisk it so it will prevent from cooking your eggs. So until 35 to 36 degrees. Also, make sure that your water from the pot doesn't touch the bowl of your eggs. Okay, done. So take off heat, whisk fast so it will not cook. And then whisk until ribbon stage. So the speed will be at around 4 to 6. So this is done. And then you need to check. So when you check, you need to see that it can form the line for about 2 to 3 seconds. Okay? So this is called the ribbon stage. So this one you put in a bowl to be mixed with the dry ingredients. So here's the first. And then lightly fold. You don't want to fold very fast because it will deflate. So fold until there's no more flour particles or cocoa powder. So until nearly done, you put one part of it into your butter and then mix. Just mix, no need to fold. And then put inside again. So after this, you want to work fast because you don't want it to deflate. Deflating means there's no more air and it will be very, very dense. Then after, put into your mat. And then spread evenly. So this one will bake at 165 for about 8 minutes. So here's the sponge after baking. So let it cool down first for a few minutes, maybe about 10 minutes. And then you flip it over. And then take it out. Then next, use your desired drink cutter and cut out the shapes that you need for your mold later. So for the next, we'll be making our glaze. So first, I'm using cocoa powder from Peotraco. So always important to sift your dry ingredients to prevent lumps. So for the gelatin, I already bloomed. And also we have here water, sugar, and glucose. So first, always water first. Then your sugar all in. Then next is your glucose. For the glucose, I warm in the microwave for about 15 seconds for it to be easier to remove from the container. So it's important to let it boil until the sugar is dissolved and do not stir, because if you stir, chances are that your sugar might crystallize and then you cannot use your syrup anymore. So be careful. As you can see, it's getting very cloudy, and then just let it boil until it becomes clear again. So until it's nearly clear, it means almost all sugar is melted. I will put in my cocoa powder. And then mix. So at this stage, you let it boil for about 1 minute while you mix. Also for the cocoa powder to dissolve completely. Okay, after it bubbles, you then stop. And always add your gelatin of heat. You do not boil gelatin, because if you boil gelatin, it will lose its power for about 5 to 10%. And then just mix until your gelatin dissolves. Okay, then after you pour into your chocolate. Make sure you scrape until the bottom of the pot. So next, to make sure that there's no lumps and completely fine, you can use a hand blender to blend. And then take out all the bubbles using the hand blender also. Here, after blending, it should be fine. Little bubbles is okay, because later you will have to put cling wrap on top, so it will take out all the bubbles. Also, if you don't have the hand blender, don't worry. You can always use the strainer, so you can strain at least twice. So make sure when you cling wrap, it's direct contact to prevent from forming skin. So for the glaze, you let it cool down and then you can use at least 30 to 33 degrees Celsius before glazing. Next, we're going to do the crumble. So first, sift in your APF, all-purpose flour. And then put inside your mixer. So for crumble, it's very easy. It's just all in. And then next, sugar, almond powder. You can use any type of nut flour if you want, not necessarily almond powder only. Because if you add different nuts, it will give you different flavors also. Also, then here is your butter. The butter should be from the chiller because if you use melted butter, chances are it will become soft and then it will form into a dough instead of crumble. So here, we're using your paddle. Okay, so for your crumble, use the paddle attachment. And then mix until it forms pea-size shape. So, just in case what happens when your crumble turns into a dough, it doesn't matter. You can always squeeze it and then use a grater and grate it to become smaller pieces. So after mixing, it should be like this shape or size. And then pour onto your tray. And then bake at 165 for about 15 to 18 minutes or until it turns golden brown. So next, we'll be making the ganache for your chocolate mousse. The ganache is your base. So for this recipe, we're using dark chocolate. So first put in your cream and then let it boil until the first big bubble. So always use medium heat to prevent it from burning. Also, you stir once in a while so the bottom part won't get burnt. So here you see some bubbles, then you can stop and then pour onto your chocolate. Okay. Then you mix. Make sure that all your chocolate is melted first or soft. Then use the hand blender again to emulsify. So the outcome must be very smooth and shiny. Also make sure that there's no lumps. Next, you put the ganache into a bowl and let it set or cool down to around 32 to 35 degrees. If you want it to cool down faster, you can put it in the chiller. Next, let's make the whipping cream. So here's the water. So use cold water and then here's your whipping cream powder. So make sure that you mix to dilute it properly first before mixing. So for this one, I'm after the medium thick consistency. So like this, and then whisk until medium peak. So it's easier to fold into your ganache. Because if you use soft pick, it's too watery, and if it's stiff pick, then it's hard for you to fold in. Okay, so after whipping, consistency should be like this, soft to medium thick. Also similar to what ribbon stage is like. And then, this is your ganache from earlier. So, pour all of your whipping cream inside. So, always remember it's light to heavy, so it will not deflate so much. And then fold. So, fold gently. Until it incorporates properly. Scrape the sides, don't leave anything. Okay, so next, pour your mousse into a piping bag so it's easier for you to put into the mold. So next here, also, if you remember the syrup from earlier, brush some onto the sponge to make it moist. So here, pipe halfway. Lightly tap so there's no air bubbles. And then put in your jelly in the middle. This is your insert. So you need to work fast or else this one might get too soft to handle. After you pipe until 80% full. And then next, last, put the sponge at the very bottom and then press lightly like this. Put in the freezer for about 4 hours. So now we're going to glaze our mousse. So the glaze is at 30 to 33 degrees and glaze from the middle. Make sure to cover all the sides. And then scrape the excess on top. And then you clean by doing this motion. Take your time, don't be in a hurry. So if you want it to be safer, get a toothpick and then transfer. to your plate or your liner. And then if you remember our crumble from earlier, you can put them on the side as your decoration. So next we're going to do the chantilly for the finishing of your Petit Gateau. So inside here we have your whipping cream and icing sugar. And then whip until stiff peak. So you whip until piping consistency. So it will not collapse. So next we'll be making macarons. So first, put in your icing sugar, cocoa powder, and almond powder into the roboku. If you don't have roboku, no problem. Mix all in and then just sift. So we use the roboku to have finer textures or granules. And then roboku for about 6 seconds. So you don't roboku for too long, because if it's too long, then it will heat up. After heating up, the sugar might melt also. The almond powder might release some of its oil and it will become a paste. So more. So after, put all the dry ingredients in a bowl. Then set aside. So next we're going to make the French meringue. So first, put your egg whites inside and whip until foamy before you put in your sugar. So don't put the sugar in yet, because if you put it now, it will become too heavy and then it will take longer time to whip up. So this one at speed 6. Until foamy, then you add the sugar gradually. color. So you whip until it peaks. We're making maroon colored macarons, so you need to add a bit of red food coloring into the meringue. Around 2 to 3 drops. So if you don't want to add any coloring, it's okay because you already have cocoa powder on your macarons. So until it peaks, then you check. So it should be standing up. So put all your meringue into another bowl so you can fold in easily later. So you fold in the dry ingredients gradually also. And then fold. Same, don't fold too fast because you don't want it to deflate. So after folding, texture should be like this, flowy. Then you can put into the piping bag. So for the nozzle, I'm using this round one. So for the nozzle, we're using this round tip. So just put half first. And then here I have made a stencil. So this one you can use the 5 peso coin, the old one, to do your stencil so everything can be even. Put here and then put your silpat or another parchment on top. Make sure it's visible to your eye. And then let's pipe. So when you pipe, make sure you pipe the ones closer to you first so you don't have to stretch. Okay. So when you pipe, make sure that it reaches the outer layer of the drawing or the stencil. So you press first and then you stop. And then you twist. Because you're after the flat shape or the flat top part, Because if you do like this, it will become something like kisses, and you don't want that to happen. So one recipe is good for 2 trays. After finish piping, you can tap to release the air bubbles, or so it can go down, so you don't have any tips anymore. And then let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes until the skin forms, and then you can bake. Next, we're doing dry caramel for our caramel buttercream. So put your heat on medium heat and let it warm for a while. So the key here is don't put all your sugar in all together, but put it gradually to avoid burning of the sugar. And also for your cream, to avoid the lumps, you can in advance warm or boil your cream and then set it aside. Caramel, this one we don't need to put some water. And also for dry caramel, you can stir so it's safe. It will not crystallize. So after you add in gradually, make sure that it melts first before you put another layer of sugar. And of course your heat, you need to adjust. If it gets too hot, then you can lower. Don't let it burn. So here your caramel is almost done. Just make sure that the sugar granules are fully melted. So you can stir or just leave it be. But keep an eye on them so it will not burn. So for the caramel, it's almost done. You can check the color by doing this and see your color preference. For this one, for me, it's okay already. So put your heat at low heat. Make sure you stir. And then put in your hot cream inside. Okay, so for next, we can put the butter inside for the glazing, and also it adds more flavor to your caramel. So just let the butter melt. Slowly stir. Make sure that there's no sugar at the bottom. So after, you can put it into the container again and let it cool down until 35 degrees to be added to your buttercream later. So next we'll be making the buttercream. So here is your softened butter. Put all in. And then paddle until light and fluffy. Add in slowly your caramel from the side so it will not scatter everywhere. stop for a while and then scrape the sides so it gets mixed properly. So here I have a piping tip again and then piping bag. So we're gonna pipe the buttercream into the macarons. We're gonna pipe the filling into the macaron. Don't pipe too much or overfill. And then after, so these are finished products for our demo. This is the macarons with caramel buttercream and your raspberry chocolate petit gateau. So thank you for watching our demo.